In November 1963, the world was rocked by a single gunshot in Dallas, Texas. President John F. Kennedy was gone. The assassination didn't just end a presidency. It triggered a series of events that would reshape global power for decades to come. To understand what truly happened, we have to look beyond Dallas, to a web of hidden struggles, secret deals, and rising tensions that connected Washington, D.C. to the Middle East. Let's rewind a few months. In Israel, a major political shift was underway. In June 1963, the nation's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, abruptly resigned as prime minister. He was replaced by Levi Eshkol, a man born in the old Russian Empire who had risen through the ranks of the new Israeli state. Officially, Ben-Gurion's resignation was for personal reasons, but the timing was suspicious. It came at the height of a standoff with President Kennedy. You see, Kennedy was deeply concerned about Israel's nuclear facility at Dimona. Since 1961, he had been demanding inspections, fearing Israel was secretly developing nuclear weapons. Ben-Gurion resisted. His sudden departure put Eshkol in charge, a new leader who needed time to find his footing. This pause bought Israel precious time, taking the immediate pressure off Dimona. The nuclear question was put on hold, but it was far from resolved. Meanwhile, back in the United States, another nuclear mystery was unfolding. At a processing plant in Pennsylvania called NUMEC, something was wrong. U.S. intelligence began to suspect that hundreds of pounds of highly enriched uranium had vanished. The founder of the plant, Zalman Shapiro, had strong connections to Israel. Coincidence? While no definitive proof ever emerged that the material was smuggled to Israel, the NUMEC affair fueled the White House's anxieties. For Kennedy, who was already pushing for inspections, this was another flashing red light. The year 1963 was a landmark for another reason. It was the year the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, better known as a IPAC, was officially established. Born from an earlier organization, a IPAC started small. But its creation marked a new era of organized political influence in Washington. It is a striking coincidence that this powerful lobbying force was born in the same year that Kennedy's pressure on Israel reached its peak, and the same year he was assassinated. But Kennedy wasn't just clashing with foreign leaders. He was also at odds with his own military. In the aftermath of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy had secretly agreed to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey in exchange for the Soviets removing theirs from Cuba. To Kennedy, it was a diplomatic victory that avoided nuclear war. But to hardliners in the Pentagon, like General Curtis LeMay, it was appeasement. LeMay openly called it the greatest defeat in our history. The tension between the civilian president and his powerful generals was palpable. Then came Dallas. Kennedy was killed, and Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president. One of Johnson's first acts was to create the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination. It was headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren and filled with prominent figures. But one name stood out: Allen Dulles, the former CIA director whom Kennedy had fired after the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. Putting a man who had been dismissed by the president on a commission investigating his murder was a shocking conflict of interest. Today, it would spark a firestorm of controversy, yet it happened. The Warren Commission went on to conclude that a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, was responsible. Case closed. But behind the scenes, not everyone was convinced. Commission member Senator Richard Russell Jr. privately expressed his doubts for the rest of his life. The official story was unanimous, but the truth was far murkier. With Kennedy gone, Johnson's presidency marked a dramatic shift in American policy. His power base was in Texas, home to oil tycoons and powerful construction firms like Brown and Root, which would later become part of Halliburton. As Johnson escalated the Vietnam War, these companies thrived. Billions in defense contracts flowed, fueling the very military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower had warned against just a few years earlier. Johnson's approach to Israel also changed dramatically. Where Kennedy was cautious and demanding, Johnson was supportive and generous. U.S. military aid to Israel soared. This new, closer relationship was cemented in 1967 during the Six-Day War. With tacit American backing, Israel launched a preemptive strike against its neighbors. In less than a week, it seized the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank, redrawing the map of the Middle East forever. The U.S.-Israel alliance was now locked in, and the stakes in the region were higher than ever. As the years passed, the unresolved threads of 1963 continued to weave through history. IPAC grew from a small committee into one of the most formidable lobbying forces in Washington. The mystery of the missing uranium from NUMEC was never officially solved, and doubts about the Warren Commission's findings and the CIA's role lingered, fueling decades of conspiracy theories. When you connect the dots, a stunning picture emerges. Ben-Gurion's timely resignation, the rise of Levi Eshkol, Kennedy's pressure on the Dimona nuclear facility, the mysterious disappearance of uranium from NUMEC, the birth of IPAC, the internal conflict with the Pentagon, the controversial makeup of the Warren Commission, and the subsequent rise of Johnson, his Texas-based backers, and the escalation in Vietnam. These weren't just isolated events. They were part of a chain reaction, a seismic shift from Kennedy's world of cautious diplomacy to Johnson's era of military expansion. A move from suspicion over Israel's nuclear program to an unbreakable alliance. The assassination of John F. Kennedy wasn't just the death of a man. It was a turning point that redirected the course of American foreign policy, empowered intelligence agencies and defense contractors, and created new global alliances whose consequences we are still living with today. 60 years later, the echoes of Dallas are still with us, a reminder of how a single moment can change the world forever. Thank you for watching. If you found this exploration of history insightful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. We'll see you next time.